There's a reason why traditionally, whenever you did a mind-altering substance, there was a medicine person there. There's a reason for that, because the medicine person has supersensory gifts. They can perceive, they're mediumistic. They can perceive spirits in the room. They can perceive people's auras. If you're in a ceremony and you get a spirit attachment, or you're having some kind of problem reintegrating into your body after going out of body, the medicine person can help you because they can see what's happening. And when you get into trouble in other dimensions, or reintegrating into your body, or bringing back attachments, there's nobody who knows it's happening to tell you, and there's no one who can reverse the damage.
Take a journey into the unseen world. My name is Benton Ryer, and this is Magick and Folklore.
For my first guest ever, I would like to introduce everyone to Dr. Jennifer Lisa Vest. Although she is a gifted psychic and medium, she primarily works as a medical intuitive. Her first book is entitled The Ethical Psychic and will be published through Penguin Random House on October 11th, 2022. Jennifer, before getting into a little bit more about who you are and more about what you do, what inspired you to write a book on psychic ethics, and what can we expect from it?
Well, I was really inspired by my students. I was teaching psychic development, healing, mediumship, Akashic records, and medical intuition over the last several years. And I found myself focusing a lot on ethics. This is in part because I come from a philosophy background. So I used to be a philosophy professor. I used to teach ethics in the university. And so when I transitioned out of the academy and into my own healing business, I brought some of that sensibility with me. And I had noticed when I was taking classes and when I was developing my own gifts that ethics was rarely discussed. And I did notice that some of my students who didn't really take what I was saying seriously would go off and get involved in abusing their power, using their gifts, and then abusing their power and get into trouble. And so I really felt like it was something that a lot of people needed. A lot of people needed to know how to use their gifts ethically, how to use them in a way that helps and never harms. And so that was the real inspiration. I actually wrote the book in 2017, and it took this long for the publishing process. My publisher is actually called North Atlantic Books, which is a small progressive press in Berkeley, but then they work with Penguin Random House, who distributes it worldwide. And what you can expect from the book is a very nice kind of guidebook for everybody who's doing any work in psychic or healing arts, whether it's psychic readings, mediumship, whether you're a Reiki practitioner or you're doing the Akashic records or a medical intuitive like me, you can get something out of this book. It's really written for everybody in every supersensory field. And it's really accessible, easy to read book telling you, okay, how can you keep yourself safe? How can you keep your clients safe? How can you make sure that you don't ever use your gifts in a way that harms somebody, either consciously or unconsciously?
Now, when you say harm someone, what do you mean?
Well, for example, what I tell people is when you have a supersensory gift, this gives you an advantage over people who don't have gifts. We are just naturally more powerful than them because we have access to information they don't have. And it's really easy to abuse that. And so one way you can harm people is that you can invade their privacy. You can read people without their permission, find out their secrets, and then use those secrets against them. You can reveal those secrets to other people. So say, for example, when I first started out as a medical intuitive, I had some situations where people came to me and asked me to do a reading for their relative, like their elderly mother or their child or something. And I didn't realize at the time that that could be abused. And people would get information about a family member that they didn't really have a right to have, and then use that to manipulate that person. You can also use your gifts to influence people to spend a lot of money on your services or to fall in love with you. And Those are all things that you can do consciously or unconsciously if you're not really trying to make sure that you're an ethical psychic.
And so it's fall in love with you for a short time, though.
Well, that's the nature of love spells. They don't last forever, and there's always a blowback. And so I do talk in the book about the danger of spells. Not really so much just the danger, but just why they're wrong. It's wrong to control another person, what I called perverting the will of another in the book. It's wrong to control another person with your gifts. And if you put a spell on somebody to make them love you, or to make them hire you for a job, or to compel them to do something against their will, you are violating their free will. And so it's wrong. And there are also consequences. It's easy to engage in those behaviors and not really recognize how harmful they are. And sometimes we don't recognize it until we face the consequences.
Okay, so yes, I always tell people that when you're trying to cast spells on people, you're actually manipulating their subconscious. And the subconscious knows that it's being manipulated, and it will fight back and eventually break free.
Yeah, love spells. It's a great example because a lot of people think love spells are harmless, that when they think of controlling another person, they think of other more serious harms. But with a love spell, you're compelling someone to love you or to like you or to date you or to sleep with you or whatever it is you're after.
Now,
and then it wears off over time. And there's usually some blowback. So one example of what can happen with that is a person can become obsessed with you and stalk you. Right.
So I have a Magick group, and every post, not so much now, but in the beginning especially, was like, I want to make so-and-so fall in love with me. How do I do it? I don't want anyone telling me not to do it. Although I would always give them a quick lecture, they still wouldn't listen and did it anyway. One woman, she went ahead and did it anyway. And that's exactly what happened. The man that she did it on became obsessed with her. And whenever another man looked at her, he would try to fight them, and even tried to rape her a few times. So it went pretty hard. But as it wore off, he stopped. But she learned her lesson. And later on, when people started coming in to say they want to do it, she'd come in and do it. I did it. Do not do it. Listen to him.
Oh, but, yeah. Sometimes you got to learn the hard way.
Right. I've never done one. So.
I have when I was young.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I can tell you about two experiences. My mother and myself, we both made the same mistake. And so I learned from both experiences. So when I was very young, my mother's also a psychic. And when I was very young, she used to invite me into the front room for these ceremonies that she did. And there was one particular ceremony where one of our babysitters had stolen her child support check, which was devastating because she was raising 3 kids on a secretary's salary. And this woman took this huge check from her. And I guess back then nowadays it's a lot easier to stop payment and do all those things to get your money back. But back then it was much easier to steal from people. And this person stole hundreds of dollars from her, and she was very upset. And so she did a spell on her. And something very bad happened to the woman. And I forget exactly what, but she was in a car accident or something bad. And my mother was devastated because, she didn't want her to be harmed. She just was angry. And I guess in the moment with the emotion, she was I think she was trying to get the money back, but instead of getting the money back, she hurt this person.
So I'm sort of for that certain thing, but you should always take some time to decide if it's really what needs to be done. Because more often than not, you decide, you know what, I'm just going to let it go.
Yeah. So the second example, in my book, I argue that you should never pervert the will of another. Mm-hmm. And that you shouldn't do things it's okay to protect yourself, but you should never actually use your gifts to harm another person, even if they are a bad person. And I know some people will disagree with me and say, well, if someone is a bad person, you have a right to harm them. I think that's something we could discuss more. But for people starting out, I think it's good to have some kind of fast and clear rules about what not to do. When I was really young, in my early 20s, I decided to do a love spell on somebody. And it was for all the wrong reasons. I mean, are there any good reasons? But it was just pride. It was someone that I didn't even really want that much. I was just insulted. They didn't want me, basically. It was just my youthful arrogance. And so this was a friend of mine. And so I did like a simple little candle love spell. And that night, this person fell hard and switched from being like just my friend to seriously wanting to date me. But after like a month, I realized that this really wasn't something I wanted long term. It was just, like I said, it was just my pride. But this person could not let it go. And they began following me around campus. I was at school, I was at college. They began telling their friends they were going to marry me. And people were coming up to me and talking about this person and the two of us. And the interesting thing about this person is that he was the child of a very powerful medicine person. So he also was very gifted. You can use your gifts against someone who's very gifted. He used to tease me or like joke and say, I'm more powerful than you. And so like when I said it was my pride, I also was trying to prove to myself that I was more powerful than him, that I could do this, which was ridiculous. I didn't need to do that. But he was very arrogant. And so even though I broke things off with this person, 10 years later, this person showed up across the country. I was now enrolled in a PhD program on the other side of the country. I had not been in touch with this person. Somehow they got all the way across the country and tracked me down, showed up in front of my apartment. I don't even know how they found me.
Wow.
They were so obsessed 10 years later. And I think they had even like hitchhiked across the country to get there or something crazy.
That's a powerful love spell.
The spell I did, I think I maybe spent 10 minutes on it. But that made me realize how powerful I was and how I needed to be careful. And so, when you have these gifts, you have to be careful because it's so easy to hurt someone. I feel like I had hurt that person, affected his life, and there was no reason for it. But I've also been on the receiving end of love spells. And that's really made me also more aware of them because, fortunately, because I'm gifted, I was conscious of the love spell when they were being put on me. And I actually confronted the person both times. And I was okay with it. And so this was an interesting lesson for me, too, is that sometimes you're putting a love spell on somebody who wants to be in a love spell. Like they're not going to resist because maybe they already liked you a little bit or they already were thinking about,
right.
Or they were open. And so I had this one woman who I met at a party put a love spell on me. And I saw it, like she walked up to me. I was looking down, so I didn't see her coming. And all of a sudden, I was wearing this necklace and she came up to me and said something about my necklace. And I looked up and she was taking this kind of translucent drapery and putting it over me. And I saw her do it. And I thought, oh, that was interesting. And then I found myself just like, oh my God, just really wanted to date her. And, and so I like got her phone number and I called her and I said right away, are you aware of what you did at the party? Like where you were putting that energy on me? Are you aware that you did that? And because a lot of people, they don't know what they're doing. Right. Mm-hmm. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
And she kind of hemmed and hawed and didn't really give a straight answer. And so I continued talking to her for a couple of weeks. And there were a couple of things I noticed. I noticed that whenever I was in her presence, that I found her super attractive. But that whenever we were separated, if I saw a picture of her, like on my phone or on Facebook, I didn't find her attractive. And I thought, oh, that's weird. And then I asked her about the spell again. And then what she did was she came into my meditation or came into my dream. She used to get up early in the morning and meditate, and I would sleep later than her. We were living in different cities, but I knew her schedule and it was different than mine. And so while I was asleep, she would come and visit me while she was in a meditation and try to like convince me of things. Now, again, because I'm psychic, I was aware of what she was doing and I just found it interesting. And so like I would call her and say, hey, y'all got your message. Like she came to me in her dream one time and said, hey, I think you should go travel with me out of town. And I called her up and said, so you want to travel, huh? Where do you want to go? I was aware of it. So I thought it was just kind of fun. But I finally confronted her again and I said, listen, this thing that you're doing where you're visiting me in my sleep and you're like putting energy on me, is this something you do whenever you date someone? Because, you're actually trying to control people with this. And do you have people's consent when you do this? And she said, well, it's okay because if I don't have their consent, it wears off after a while. But this was how she got dates. We only dated for a couple of weeks, but I thought it was interesting that I got to perceive what is it like to be on the receiving end of a love spell. And, I was having fun with it, so it didn't harm me in any way.
Before we go any further, for my listeners that are confused about love spells flying between men and women, can you clear that up about yourself so everyone understands?
Yeah, I'm gay, but when I was young, like when that love spell I did when I was in my, when I was 22, I was going through a bisexual phase. And so I tried to date that guy, but yeah, I'm gay. But yeah, it can work with either gender, any gender, all genders.
Right.
Love spells work regardless of your sexuality and regardless of the gender presentation of the person that you're trying to get. And it's kind of irrelevant.
Back to your book. Does it cover anything else other than just ethics?
Let me see. So my book covers the traits of an ethical psychic, the risks that you take when you work as a psychic, why interfering with the will of others is wrong. It also has a whole section on working with spirits. So it talks about the ethics of working with spirits.
Okay, let's do the first one.
Okay.
Right. Can you read that again, please?
The traits of an ethical psychic.
I think maybe the one after.
The risks of psychic work.
Right. So I was watching on Netflix. I think there's a medium named Tyler Henry. He's very talented. Mm-hmm. But he has no idea why he's getting collapsed lungs and heart problems at like 22 years old. Mm. He made a statement about, oh, no, it's probably not related. Can you address that a little bit?
That's an interesting question. And you know what? I did not include that in my book. So I did not include risks to the psychic. And I probably should have. So that'll have to be in the next book. The risks I discussed were only the risks to the client. But you're right. There are risks to the I do briefly discuss it when I talk about working with spirits. I do talk about spirit attachment and things that can go wrong that can hurt the psychic as well. But yeah, whenever you're working with energy, whether you're working as a psychic or a healer, there's a possibility of you being negatively influenced by other people's energy or the energy of maleficent spirits. And sometimes that can result in illness, in different problems in your life. I'll speak from my own experience. I have a heart condition, and it was explained to me by my guides that my heart condition is caused by my multidimensional work. So I don't even cover that in the book. That'll be in the next book, because most people don't do multidimensional work. But right. Multidimensional work is where you travel in and out of your body a lot and go into other realms. And I do that when I work as a medical intuitive or an Akashic Records reader, or some of the ceremonies I do. I move in and out of my body frequently, and I move in and out through my heart chakra. One of the side effects of that is that I have a heart condition. And so I've been told by my guides I needed to do less of that work. And I spent many, many years seeing lots of clients, working with a lot of people. And now I'm on a break, in part because my body's getting worn down from all that work. And so, yeah, certain types of work can harm the psychic, and some work, can harm the client. And the client is mostly the focus of my book.
Well, it's more so with mediums, especially.
Mediums especially tend to get very sick. When I was getting trained by the spiritualists, I've been trained by, in a number of traditions, Native American, African American, Caribbean, and spiritualists. And the spiritualists I studied with, they told me that a lot of mediums develop diabetes in particular. Mm-hmm. And part of it is because after you do a lot of mediumship sessions, you get very tired, and then you find yourself eating sugar to kind of give yourself energy.
Not only that, there's a high percentage of mediums who will experience what the person went through when they died. And they think, well, he's showing me what they died. But what it was explained to me is, no, that's not it at all. That's the last energetic implant they left on this earth before they went out. So they don't have much control over it or the person they're bringing through.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're an empath, if you're using clairsentience, like I worked, as a medical intuitive, I use a lot of clairsentience. So I do take on all the symptoms of each client when I'm working with them for the hour. And for that hour, I have all their pain and discomfort. And that's one of the ways I can identify the issues. And so it can be a problem that when you're done, you don't let go of that. And then the same with spirits. Like you said, if you're working with spirits, we often are finding out about their cause of death because that's such an important key moment for spirits. If you visit your past lives, you're going to tend to visit your past death because that's always where the big lesson is. Like when you die, that's when the soul kind of gets the lesson from that lifetime, is at the moment of death. And so going into past lives, working with spirits who have passed tragically is going to put the psychic medium at risk of taking on some of those conditions, and also just of wearing down the body from, all of that energy that you're kind of subjecting yourself to.
Right, let's talk about fake gurus and fake psychics and fake spiritualists a little bit. With YouTube, especially now, people are given a platform to get big really quick because they tend to say the things that their audience want to hear.
That's true.
But what kind of damages are they doing? And how can you spot someone who is a fake channeler, for example?
I was just wondering if I should read something from the book.
Yeah, go ahead. Are you allowed to?
Yes.
All right, go for it.
Okay, so I'll read a little bit from the book about fake gurus. Fake gurus are supersensory persons who use their gifts to control others. Teachers of healing and psychic arts and spiritual leaders with psychic gifts are all at risk of becoming fake gurus. Real gurus do exist, but fake gurus are more prevalent, at least outside of India. Fake gurus and shamans are particularly dangerous because they often engage in perverting the will of another, misusing sexual energy, and cultural appropriation all at once. So those are three of the risks that I talk about with psychic work: perverting the will of another, misusing sexual energy, and cultural appropriation. And when it comes to fake gurus, they manage to do all three. And so a fake guru is somebody who sets themselves up as this holy teacher, as this person who's wiser than everybody, and puts himself in a position where other people will revere them and will take them as an authority figure without question. And
Right.
Once they've established that status, they then can get people to do almost anything. And that's because they've perverted this traditional notion of a guru, which comes out of India. And so in India, a guru is a teacher who is an example, and you're supposed to live the way they live. And then they teach you how to live. And there's an incredible amount of reverence for the guru. And you'll do things like serve them and do chores for them. And there's all kinds of things you will do for a guru in exchange for the wisdom. Well, when that gets brought to the US by people who are no longer practicing within the culture it comes out of, they then just kind of pull out the parts that serve them,
Right.
and leave behind the parts they don't want to deal with. So like the renunciation and the giving up wealth and giving up rich foods and sex and glory and status that's supposed to be a part of the guru path, that all gets thrown by the wayside. And then you have people coming to the US, and some of them are not, some of them are non-Indian Euro-Americans. Some of them are Indians from India or Indian Americans, but they've all kind of left the path of the guru. And now they're using that institution to manipulate others. Yeah. How can you tell? I have some things that now I'm forgetting.
I have my ways, but I want to hear yours too. And I'm sure everyone else does also.
Well, there are some red flags. So a guru or spiritual teacher who tells you to do something, but then they're not doing it, right? The hypocrisy is an important sign of a fake guru. So you often see this with gurus where they are having multiple sexual partners in their community, and then they're requiring the members of their community to be celibate. Or they're telling their members of their community they have to give up all their worldly wealth, but then they're living a wealthy and lavish lifestyle. Or they're telling their students, you have to meditate 3 hours a day, but they don't meditate 3 hours a day. And so hypocrisy is a very good sign. This is where my memory is affecting me. I'm trying to remember.
That's all right. Do you want to tell everyone just real quick what happened and why you're having memory issues?
Yeah. I was in a bad car accident 1.5 years ago where a careless, distracted driver who I think was texting rear-ended me at a stoplight. And I suffered a head injury. My head hit the side windshield. And as a result, I have problems with memory loss and speech processing, which slows me down a little bit. So sometimes I'm forgetting.
I bet no one's been able to tell up until we just told them.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm trying to remember the other sides of a fake guru. That's what I mean. It's like I'm not quite as quick as I used to be.
One thing I notice observing a lot of videos of people is that they tend to talk in circles.
Circular reasoning.
Yes.
Yeah. Certainly. That's one of the things I talk about in the book is that, cult leaders and fake gurus and fake shamans, these are not just sociopaths. These are gifted people. So in most cases, someone who is able to be a fake guru or a cult leader, a revered spiritual teacher is truly gifted. They actually have a lot of psychic gifts. And they often have other gifts like rhetoric, like what you're talking about, the ability to speak very well. They're usually very intelligent and they have something to offer. And I say this because I think the reason that so many people get caught up in these cult-like movements is because they walk into it with a false assumption. And their false assumption is only someone who's really foolish would get involved in a cult, or only somebody who's really broken emotionally would get involved in a cult. And that simply isn't the case, because these people are very gifted and they are offering something of benefit to their students. And what they're offering is so powerful that people are willing to change their values, to give up so many, their friends, their family, their worldly goods, because there's something of value that they're offering. And so I think that's important to recognize that these are people with gifts who are intelligent, who have something that's valuable, but then they manipulate it for their own purposes.
Very often they're able to do one thing that they demonstrate on one person, and that's all it takes, is because that one person has never seen anything like it before.
Right. Exaggerating their abilities. But I do think it's important for people to realize that there are a lot of fake gurus and shamans out there who are truly gifted, because otherwise, if you just say, oh, they're all just fakes, then that's how people get caught up, because when they encounter someone who really is gifted, they assume that means they can't be a fake, they can't be a fraud, they can't be well, yes, they can, because you can have gifts and use them unethically. And having a gift doesn't make you an ethical person. You have to want to be an ethical person.
Yes, they think, well, this person must be very spiritual, so they have to be a good person.
Right. And spirituality and supersensory gifts are two different things. And you can be born with gifts. You can even go to school and develop them with somebody who never taught you any ethics or never taught you any spirituality, and become very gifted without ever developing a moral compass.
I think in history, a good example of someone that was like that is Rasputin.
Tell me about Rasputin.
Rasputin is the one who the Romanovs brought in to cure their sick son, Alexei. And he really did have some power. He probably was the sole reason why the Romanov dynasty fell. He started making policy, and he did have gifts, which is why the family held on to him, because he was healing their sick son. And he would make all these demands of them too, like be celibate and do this and this, but he was a lecher. It's not confirmed, but it's suspected that he actually molested the Romanov daughters.
I think it's really important for people to recognize is that a person can have a lot of power and still be a very bad person. There's no connection. That's why we need books like mine. People need to learn how to behave ethically alongside the development of their gifts, because it doesn't just come automatically. And I don't know why people think that's the case. I don't know why. I mean, we have kind of both views, right? We either have the view that anyone who practices anything psychic is a witch, who's a bad person, who's hurting people. And then we have the other idea that if somebody has a certain amount of gifts, that they must be a good person. They must be spiritual. We have kind of both of those beliefs in our culture.
Right. I think a lot of that has to do with the New Age movement, and that no one with any gifts can do any wrong. And spirituality means purity for some reason, which is ridiculous because that's never been the case with any religion ever.
Right. With power comes temptation. I think one of the things you should look for in somebody, if you want to make sure you don't want to get caught up with a fake shaman or a fake guru, is humility. You want to look for humility. A truly gifted person does not need to toot their own horn. They don't have to go around telling you how great they are. They don't have to lord over you and tell you that they're better than you. Because if you have gifts, you already know that you have abilities other people don't have. You already know that you know things that other people don't know. You don't actually need to brag about that, right? That's just like a fact of life. But the people that are going around being really arrogant, it's usually because they want to control somebody. Humility, I'm trained in Afro-Caribbean and Hoodoo and Native American traditions. And in those traditions, there's an expectation that you're going to be humble if you have a certain amount of power. That's the way you're trained. That's the way I was trained. And it's so much so that you will find that a lot of indigenous healers have a difficult time promoting themselves and kind of working in a business in a society like ours where everything is monetized. There's nothing wrong with receiving payment for your gifts. And that's another thing I talk about in the book, is that it's okay to receive payment from your gifts. We have this expectation also sometimes in our society that healers should work for free and that they should not be paid. And if you ask for money, then you're somehow corrupt. But healers have to pay the rent too. And we pay everybody else, including doctors. We pay doctors a huge amount of money to do the same work. And so healers need to be paid, and psychics can certainly be paid for what they do. Mediums can be paid. It's a valuable service. But when you're using your gifts to manipulate people who can't afford you, that's when you're getting into kind of an unethical area. So an example is a psychic who you go to them and they tell you, oh, you have a spell on you. To remove it, you have to come see me and I'll remove it for $500.
I talk about that all the time.
And that's just wrong. You shouldn't do that.
Very often they put the spell on the person when they leave, and the person gets really sick and they come crawling back and say, oh, you were right. Here's $1,000.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's also that extreme of people who are putting spells on their clients, but any kind of really obnoxious kind of upselling where you're just preying on people's fears to get a lot of money out of them when they can't afford it. So I also think it matters who you're dealing with. What I say in the book is that you should be aware of your client's financial situation if it's relevant. So like if you have a client coming to you for session after session and they keep talking to you about their financial difficulties and how they're in such financial straits, but they're paying you for sessions, right? You might want to stop seeing them, because they can't afford you. And if they're in so much financial distress, they should probably be using that money to pay their bills. You don't want to tell that person, oh, for $500, I can fix your financial woes. It's like, and so also I talk about client dependency as one of the risks of psychic work. Clients can become very dependent on psychics and healers, and to the point where they feel like they have to come to you all the time for multiple sessions, and they start having a hard time making their own decisions in life because they have to have your input. I knew somebody once who worked closely with a spiritual teacher, psychic, and this person she had like on speed dial. Like she had to text this person like throughout the day to ask them little things like, should I take off work on Friday? I mean, like the person couldn't make decisions for herself anymore because they had become so dependent on this psychic teacher. And I've had some clients like that will start calling me and trying to make appointments all the time, or trying to get rush appointments and urgent appointments. And what I do is I just say, I can't see you, because it's become clear to me that they've become too dependent. And so I do think that's another risk of this work, is that you create these dependencies, and those aren't good for people.
No, they're not. They have all the answers already. They just don't know how to clear their mind, or they're anxious about everything.
Right.
So they can't really receive those messages for themselves or use their own logic and reasoning.
Yeah.
People absolutely take advantage of that for their own financial gain, which defeats the purpose. There's a lot of those things that through the work I'm doing, the gurus and the fake shamans you talk about are trying to kind of achieve and pull in for themselves. I tend to care about them less and less. And I have to actually focus on it and say, no, I have to do this or else I'm going to be homeless, right? I can't do this practice now or spend this much time on it because I have to do more material things.
Well, yeah, you know what happens when people don't get paid is they do get sick a lot more, like what you were talking about, because they're trying to work full time at some job and then do all of their psychic and healing work after hours, and they're exhausting themselves. The person can't work at their best if they're under constant financial distress. Right. You're not going to be your best version of a healer or a psychic if you're constantly worried about paying the rent.
I was recently told that I need to eat a lot more meat, and meat's expensive.
Yeah.
I removed someone, they got COVID, and I removed it. And people hearing this that stumble onto this podcast probably won't believe that. Mm-hmm. But I do a group every night on Zoom, and people do get sick and they're better very, very quickly right after my sessions. But I didn't get paid by the person. She didn't offer to pay, but she was ready during our session. She got up and said, oh, that's my doctor. I need to talk to him. The doctor basically told her, I can't help you.
Right.
So she lied back down. And when I finished, she was like, oh my God, Benton, I feel great. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. And I went back to my place and listened to my roommate talk about how she needed the rent and how she's worried about it. Like, how much was the service I did just work? She got COVID once before, and for 2 months she was sick, and now she's not sick.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that I think is going to be changing in our society as there's more and more acceptance and respect for this work. I could tell similar stories about my work as a medical intuitive. I never have charged a lot as a medical intuitive. My rates have always been lower than most other medical intuitives. And yet I have people coming to me who had illnesses that they've had for years. And after seeing me for one session, they no longer have the illness because I was able to identify what it was, to tell them what treatment to take. They were able to take that to their doctor, get the treatment. And finally, after years of running around to all these doctors, they're finally cured. What is that worth? Right? That's worth thousands of dollars, probably. I didn't get thousands of dollars.
Right.
Nor did I ask for thousands. But as we progress as a culture, hopefully we'll begin to recognize the power and value of healers, and we'll start to want to support them more. Traditionally, in indigenous cultures, the medicine people, the healers, the shamans were always completely supported by the community. And so their house, their clothing, their food, everything they needed was provided for in exchange for them being available to heal people and run ceremonies. And so I can give you an example of somebody I know. There was a medicine man that I knew who was studying with me. And one of the things that I told him, he was working full-time at a really exhausting job, low-paying job. He had a family. And then he was doing healing for his tribe in his off hours. And he got really, really sick, like hospital sick, multiple times in the hospital with a chronic condition. And I said to him, look, this is traditionally how it was done. I want you to go to your tribe and propose to them that they pay you, that they make medicine man a paid position in your tribe, because traditionally it was something the tribe always paid for. And he did that, and they actually did that. They created a position for them, they even gave him an office. And he was able to stop working at his other job and devote himself full time to healing work. That's what we need to return to.
It gives you time to become more powerful.
Right.
So he gets better at it. So
yeah.
It's important.
Yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn.
For sure.
I've been working on that lesson for a while.
You know what? I forgot to ask you something. What is a medical intuitive? What is it?
Yeah, what is a medical intuitive?
Because I do something a bit different, and this is going to confuse my listeners and my followers.
So there aren't a whole lot of medical intuitives, and so a lot of people don't know what they are yet.
There's a lot of fake ones.
I probably.
Fake ones.
I certainly went to a few fake medical intuitives before I became one. So yes, there are. I don't know how many there.
There's a lot. The fakeness of people doing spiritual stuff is growing. A lot of what I've seen is maybe people will learn a little Reiki and they'll learn like sound bowls, things like that. From there, they just kind of make up their own. And it's really offensive. And it goes back to what you say about cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation.
And when people hear that, they think, this belongs to that culture. I can't do it. I can't do that tradition. I can't study it. I have to stay away. But that's not what it is at all. A man that I became familiar of, I can't remember his name. He was a white guy. He learned 4 Native American languages and learned all the tribe's traditions while staying with them, learning the culture. And he became very, very well respected, up to the point where some producers for Goop Lab asked him if he wanted to be on it. And he was like, I'm not a showman. I'm not doing that. I help people get rid of their attachments. And he recently died before I could interview him. Unfortunately, I would have really, really liked to. He relocated to Mexico. But over time, it kind of turned into this touristy type locale where people would just appropriate what the locals were trying to do. He would explain people would take drugs to try to shift their consciousness. When, of course, me and you know that's not the way. You want to talk about that a little bit more too. Young people especially, they think that psychedelics and drugs are the only way to go. And that's the only way they can be spiritual.
I was trying to find the section in my book on cultural appropriation.
His name was Bobby, by the way.
Bobby.
Yeah.
Okay, what was the question again?
Drugs. Drugs and trying to shift your consciousness.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
Young people do that.
I feel strongly about this.
So do I.
Yeah, this is one of the aspects of cultural appropriation is that everybody's running down to Peru to have their ayahuasca ceremony.
Then they come back and do their own.
And then they come back and set themselves up as a fake shaman and run their own ayahuasca ceremony and charge all their friends money. It's really dangerous. So it's unethical for. Oh, I didn't answer the medical intuition question.
Oh, we have time. Go ahead.
I'll answer that later. First of all, it's wrong because it's cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is not just practicing someone else's culture. It's extracting someone else's culture from the community and then putting it into another community where you then set yourself up as an expert of somebody else's culture and then make money off of it or create status from that role. And then you deny money and status to the people who originated it. So, for example, the example I give in the book is this guy I knew who was going down to Peru, doing ceremonies, working with a shaman. And then he started bringing the shaman up to the US to run ceremonies. Of course, he's taking a cut out of all this. He's making money off of all of this. Well, then he decides, I don't even need to bring the shaman. That's a lot of money I'm spending bringing the shaman up to the States. I'll just run my own ceremonies. And so now what has he done? He's making money, creating status for himself, turning himself into an expert on someone else's culture, and then also displacing the shaman who actually had the teachings and should be making the money off of it. And so this is what cultural appropriation is. You can learn from other cultures, but when you engage
by them usually.
Right. People are very generous. And this shaman was very generous with, training this young man how to do things. But you don't become an expert overnight. And cultural appropriation is usually about a limited amount of interaction with a culture. And then self-designation of I'm now a shaman. I'm now a expert on this ceremony. I can now run a ceremony on my own without any oversight by an actual shaman.
Yeah, right.
Right. I'm now the shaman. Shaman is, it takes years to study. I spent my whole life studying. And this is one of the mistakes that a lot of people make, and I talk about it in the book, is they're just in such a hurry. They take a couple classes and then they want to hang a shingle. And it's like, you're not ready to hang a shingle. Why should people pay you when you've only spent a year developing your gifts? I spent years and years developing my gifts. I studied with so many people, and I worked for free for many years, volunteering, getting better, right? Developing, and then working for other people for lower fees to just learn, right? Apprenticeships. Then you can finally be someone because, okay, I am this medical intuitive, I am this healer, right? Because you've done the work. But everybody's in a hurry, right? Americans, especially, we're in a hurry to
Not
learn.
just Americans anymore. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, yeah, we're not just us, but we're really, really good at being in a hurry.
True.
And wanting to capitalize on things and make money off of things very quickly. But psychedelics, it's basically a shortcut. People who don't want to do the work of developing their gifts will take a substance so that they can very quickly have an altered experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's lots of traditional indigenous ceremonies that include the use of substances, of hallucinogens to facilitate an altered state. But the problem is that people are doing those substances outside of ceremonies,
right,
which sets them up for all kinds of psychic harm. And they're also doing it as a way to avoid doing the development work.
Well, it's not only that. The people in, say, South America, the shamans there, they know the land that they're at. They know the spirits of the land. They know the ancestral spirits. They know the plant spirits. They know everything around them. So they're able to protect the space. That's why it's so dangerous just to go up to Bunker Hill and try to do the same thing.
Oh, yeah. And, I know some people personally who got into trouble doing that, who decided to have their own little quote unquote ceremony in their office with some friends, and then opened up a portal and started to have spirit attachments, because when you do substances like that, it can often put a hole in your aura. And once you have a hole in your aura, beings can attach. And that can happen with alcohol. It can happen with any kind of drug, whether it's illegal or legal, whether it's a ceremonial herb or a over-the-counter pharmaceutical.
Yeah, I know a very young girl here in Southern California. She's doing healings for everyone, and she eats a lot of edibles and does mushrooms, and she does healings all the time.
Very dangerous.
She won't listen. She won't listen to anyone.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. There's a reason why traditionally, whenever you did a mind-altering substance, there was a medicine person there. There's a reason for that, because the medicine person has supersensory gifts. They can perceive, they're mediumistic. They can perceive spirits in the room. They can perceive people's auras. If you're in a ceremony and you get a spirit attachment, or you're having some kind of problem reintegrating into your body after going out of body, the medicine person can help you because they can see what's happening. Right. If you're by yourself with a bunch of other people who have no training, there's nobody to help you. And when you get into trouble in other dimensions, or reintegrating into your body, or bringing back attachments, there's nobody who knows it's happening to tell you. And there's no one who can reverse the damage.
And not only that, a lot of other dimensions are merging in from other places that even seasoned practitioners haven't experienced yet.
Well, of course. Yeah, there's that too. So you can be a supersensory person with a lot of gifts, but you don't travel interdimensionally.
Right. It's
It's
very important too, is to keep learning.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people, they kind of reach this peak of what they can do, and they just kind of run with it and don't want to learn or read anything else.
Well, I talk about that in the book too. You have to keep having teachers, no matter how much you learn or how gifted you become, you always have to keep learning. And whenever you see someone who becomes a fake guru or shaman, or starts misusing their gifts, it's usually the case that that person no longer has any teachers in their life. They think they are the teacher.
Yeah, the teacher of teachers, right?
But teachers need teachers. And so, one of the things I tell people is always talk to the old people. My whole life, I have always talked to elders. Whenever I meet an elder, I try to learn from them. I go out of my way to meet elders who know more than I do. This is something you should always do, no matter how accomplished you are, no matter how successful, no matter how many positive reviews you have on Yelp. You should still be asking for advice from people who are older than you, or more gifted than you, or more established than you, or who've been doing it longer than you. They're out there. There's lots of people out there like that.
You can know more than someone, but you don't know everything that they know. And you don't have the experiences that they've had that you could learn from. Exactly. And that goes with anything in life.
Right.
It doesn't have to just be
that's why
spiritual stuff.
You also have to learn from your students. And that's also a sign of an unethical spiritual teacher, is when they don't let their students correct them, or they don't allow their students to have dialogue with them. And they're just busy kind of didactically delivering information.
Right.
That's not a good sign. That's not a sign of a good teacher. I think another sign of a good spiritual teacher is when they're able to use humor, to be humble, but also to be able to use humor, to not take everything so seriously, when they're able to admit they've made a mistake. If you could admit you've made a mistake in front of your students or in front of your clients, that's a very good sign.
I always tell the people that come to my groups that I don't have all the answers. It's true, I could find out a lot of different things, but always beware people that have an answer for everything on the spot. There's a ton of folks like that.
Oh yeah. That's one of the things I talk about too with working with clients. You have to tell your clients about your limitations. You can't present yourself as someone who can do everything. And you have to be honest about how accurate you are. So one of the things that I teach my students who are learning medical intuition or any psychic ability is that the very best psychics in the world are 80 to 90% accurate. And so if anyone presents themselves to you as 100% accurate, run in the other direction. That's a lie.
Oh.
And if your clients assume that you're 100% accurate, that's not good. They're going to be set up for disappointment, and they're going to maybe listen to some things you said that weren't accurate because you didn't tell them, hey, I'm 80% accurate. So there's going to be a few things I get wrong. And when they tell you get it wrong, you have to say, okay, my bad. I got that wrong. You don't do what a lot of these famous psychics on radio do or TV. Oh, no, I'm right. You just need to think about it some more and you'll realize that I'm right. And it's like, no, you could be wrong.
Well, I always tell people time and possibility isn't linear. It's like a river that branches off into many streams and moves forward.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no way you can always be right about everything.
Right, because the future's not set.
Right, even in the present.
Yeah, exactly. We've got different timelines.
Yep. Right. Let's go back real quick. What is a medical intuitive? You never answered that. And I want to give you the chance to do that since that's what you are.
So a medical intuitive is a psychic who uses clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, claircognizance, telepathy, and other psychic gifts to tune into a person's body and identify illness and the causes of it, and also to identify possible treatments. And so it's a very specialized form of intuition. And the people that come to a medical intuitive are typically people with medical mysteries, medical issues that have not been solved. They've gone to doctors, they've gone to healers, they've gone to different people, and they're still sick. And so there's some information they don't have. And the medical intuitive can find out what the physical causes are of their condition, but also their emotional causes and sometimes spiritual causes of their illness. And a medical intuitive, you can work as a kind of adjunct therapy with other therapies. And so when people come to me, of course, I don't take the place of their doctor. That's illegal. But I give them information to help them advocate for themselves with their healthcare provider. And so I might say to them, hey, this is what I found. Go to your doctor and ask for this imaging. And then they will see the same thing that I saw. And then they will give you the treatment that you actually need instead of the treatment that they're giving you now, which is for something that's an inaccurate assumption. Or I'll recommend that they go see an herbalist, or that they go see an Ayurvedic doctor, or they go see an acupuncturist, and I'll help them get to another healthcare provider that actually is the right one for their particular condition.
And stress and anxiety, how does that often manifest into ailments in the physical body? I run into that quite often, and it's something that people just don't understand. So they often think, well, I'm just stressed and I just have anxiety and that's just how I am and I'm not changing it. It's nothing to be fixed. Can you address that?
Yeah, it's kind of a sensitive issue, and one that I feel strongly about because I know what it's like to be on both sides of the equation. I was sick for many years, and that's how I became a medical intuitive. That kind of led me into working with a medical intuitive, and then eventually becoming one. And so I know what it's like to be the patient, and I know what it's like to be the practitioner helping the patient. And what we see a lot is that in the West, we seem to only think of illness as either caused by physical things or caused by emotional things. And there's also an unfortunate association in our country, in our culture, with between gender, race, and emotionality. And so when men go to the doctor, their ailments are considered legitimate and real, worthy of serious testing and investigation and treatment. And they're assumed to be physical in origin. When women go to the doctor with the same exact ailment, the doctors often say, oh, it's emotional. It's not a real condition. You just go get therapy. And they do the same thing with people of color. They say, oh, it's not a real ailment. You're just stressed. And so we have this ridiculous dichotomous belief in our current healthcare system that it's either one or the other. My experience as a medical intuitive is that most illness is caused by a combination of physical and emotional causes. And so stress is usually implicated in most illness because we have a really stressful society that we live in. We have so much focus here on work and everyone's so economically insecure, and there's so much racism and sexism. I mean, right now, all the women in our country are completely freaked out, lost basic human rights. And so that's going to take a huge toll on women's health, the stress of that, the stress of losing basic rights. And that's the kind of stress that people of color also experience. So you see these incredibly high rates of diabetes in the Native American community. Part of that is stress. You see really high rates of heart disease in the Black community, right? That's part of that is stress. Stress is a huge part, but it's not the only part. And so the problem is you can't tell somebody, oh, your illness is caused by stress and expect them to get better by just addressing the stress. Because usually by the time something has manifested in the body, it is physical. You got to do both. You have to address the physical and the emotional to get better. And so, yeah, we're missing that kind of integrative approach. And that's one of the gifts of medical intuition, is that we're bringing that way of thinking to modern healthcare.
All right. Is there anything else you want to add?
Oh, I did want to add something. I've just recently launched an online school, Metatron's Academy. And you can get there by going to medicalintuitiontraining.com. And it's being hosted on Teachable. And I just launched a medical intuition course. And I also have some other courses I'll be launching. And I'm going to probably have an ethical psychic course to go with the book after the book comes out, after the book tour. I'm going to have a book launch party in October, and then I'm going on a book tour.
Any final words?
I want people to be aware that we're in the middle of a shift in consciousness. And even though it looks really bad at times, like right around now, it looks kind of apocalyptic. But I want people to recognize that we are in a shift. And although things might get worse for a while, they're ultimately going to get better because we're shifting to a higher consciousness. And of course, there's a lot of like last gasp energy that creates a lot of conflict and negativity. And that's why we have pandemic, and we have the loss of women's rights, and we have the police brutality and the racist supremacist terrorism rising up. We have all of these things happening right at once. Climate change. It may look bad, but I want people to recognize that this is how things sometimes look when you're shifting to a higher level. Sometimes it's ugly on the way out.
Take a journey into the unseen world. My name is Benton Ryer, and this is Magick and Folklore.